The mahogany table stretched between us like a battlefield, its polished surface reflecting the harsh fluorescent lights of the law office. I sat rigid in my chair, my hands clasped so tightly in my lap that my knuckles had turned white, watching as Mr. Henderson, our family attorney, shuffled through the papers that would determine my mother's final wishes. The air conditioning hummed overhead, but I felt suffocated by the tension that filled the room like smoke. Aunt Michelle sat across from me, her perfectly manicured fingers drumming impatiently against her designer purse, while my cousin Stephen lounged beside her with that smug expression I'd grown to despise over the years. They had barely spoken to my mother in the last decade, yet here they were, vultures circling what remained of her life. My mother had been gone for 3 weeks now, and the grief still hit me in waves that left me breathless and disoriented. She had been my anchor, my confidant, the one person who understood the dreams I carried and the fears that kept me awake at night. We had lived together in our small house on the outskirts of Austin, just the two of us against the world, and I had held her hand as cancer slowly stole her away from me. The memory of her final words still echoed in my mind. "Emily, sweetheart, remember that the most precious things aren't always what they seem to be." At the time, I thought she was talking about love, about memories, about the intangible bonds that death couldn't break. I never imagined she was giving me a clue to something much more concrete. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat and began reading from the will, his voice monotone and professional as he listed off my mother's modest possessions. The house would go to me, along with her savings account and most of her personal belongings, which brought a small measure of relief to my aching heart. But then he reached the section about her jewelry, and I felt my world begin to tilt on its axis. To my sister Michelle, I leave my grandmother's pearl necklace, the one she always admired during family gatherings. The words hit me like a physical blow, and I gasped audibly, causing everyone in the room to turn and stare at me. That necklace had been my mother's most treasured possession, the one thing she wore to every important occasion, the piece of jewelry she had promised would be mine someday. Aunt Michelle's face lit up with triumph, and she actually clapped her hands together like a child who had just been given an unexpected gift. Oh, how wonderful. I always told Margaret how much I loved that necklace. She must have remembered our conversations about it. Her voice dripped with false sentimentality, and I wanted to scream at her hypocrisy. This was the same woman who had missed my mother's birthday for the past 5 years, who had been too busy with her social calendar to visit when Mom was dying in the hospital. Stephen nodded approvingly beside her, no doubt already calculating how much the antique pearls might be worth on the market. The injustice of it all made my stomach churn with a mixture of rage and disbelief. I found my voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. But she promised it to me. She always said it would be mine when she was gone. The words sounded pathetic even to my own ears, like the desperate plea of a child who had been denied a toy. Mr. Henderson looked at me with sympathy, but his expression was firm as he explained that the will was legally binding and had been signed and witnessed properly. Aunt Michelle's smile grew wider, and she reached across the table to pat my hand in a gesture that felt more like a slap. "Oh dear, I'm sure your mother left you plenty of other lovely things. Besides, this necklace has been in our family for generations. It really should stay with someone who can properly appreciate its history." Her condescending tone made my blood boil, but I was too shocked and heartbroken to formulate a coherent response. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of legal jargon and signatures, but all I could think about was the betrayal I felt burning in my chest. How could my mother have done this to me? How could she have given away the one thing that connected me to our family's past, to the grandmother I had never met, but whose stories had filled my childhood with wonder? As we prepared to leave, Aunt Michelle made a show of hugging me, her expensive perfume overwhelming my senses as she whispered in my ear, "I'll take good care of it, sweetheart. Maybe someday I'll let you borrow it for a special occasion." The patronizing offer felt like salt in an open wound, and I pulled away from her embrace as quickly as politeness would allow. Walking to my car in the parking lot, I felt hollow and defeated, like a shell of the person I had been just hours before. The Texas sun beat down mercilessly on the asphalt, creating waves of heat that distorted my vision and made everything seem surreal and dreamlike. I sat behind the wheel for several minutes, unable to start the engine, as tears of frustration and grief streamed down my cheeks. My phone buzzed with a text message, and I glanced down to see it was from my best friend Sarah, asking how the reading had gone. I couldn't bring myself to respond, couldn't find the words to explain how thoroughly my world had been upended in the span of an hour. The necklace was gone, claimed by people who had never truly loved my mother, and there was nothing I could do about it. But as I finally turned the key in the ignition and began the drive home to the empty house that now belonged to me, a memory surfaced from the depths of my grief-stricken mind. 3 days before she died, my mother had asked me to bring her a small wooden box from her bedroom closet, one I had seen countless times but never really paid attention to. She had held it close to her chest, her eyes bright with a secret she seemed desperate to share, but the morphine had made her drowsy and confused. "Emily," she had whispered, "when I'm gone, this box, it's for you. Promise me you'll remember." At the time, I had assumed she was talking about the box itself, perhaps filled with old photographs or letters, but now I wondered if there was something more, something that might help me understand why she had chosen to give away the necklace that meant so much to both of us. The house felt different when I walked through the front door, as if my mother's absence had somehow changed the very air inside. Every corner held memories that seemed to whisper her name, from the kitchen where she had taught me to make her famous chocolate chip cookies to the living room where we had spent countless evenings watching old movies and sharing our dreams. I dropped my purse by the door and headed straight to her bedroom, my heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and dread. The wooden box sat exactly where I had left it on her nightstand, small and unassuming, its dark surface worn smooth by decades of handling. I picked it up with trembling fingers, surprised by how heavy it felt for something so modest in size, and carried it to the kitchen table where the afternoon light would help me see clearly. The box was locked, but I remembered seeing my mother keep a small key hidden in her jewelry case, tucked behind a false bottom that she thought I didn't know about. My hands shook as I retrieved the tiny brass key, and I had to take several deep breaths to steady myself before inserting it into the lock. The mechanism turned with a soft click that seemed to echo through the silent house, and I lifted the lid slowly, half expecting to find nothing more than old photographs or perhaps a few pieces of costume jewelry that held sentimental value. Instead, I gasped at what lay before me. Nestled in faded velvet was an exact replica of my grandmother's pearl necklace, identical in every detail to the one that Aunt Michelle had just claimed as her own. The pearls gleamed with the same lustrous beauty, the clasp bore the same intricate silver design, and even the length appeared to be precisely the same. My mind raced as I lifted the necklace from the box, feeling the familiar weight of the pearls against my palm. How was this possible? Had my mother somehow had a copy made, and if so, why had she never told me about it? I examined every detail, looking for some sign that this was a reproduction, but the craftsmanship appeared flawless, and the pearls felt genuine against my skin. Beneath where the necklace had lain, I discovered a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age and covered in my mother's careful handwriting. My heart hammered against my ribs as I unfolded the letter, recognizing the blue ink from the pen she had always used for important documents. The date at the top made me catch my breath. It had been written just 2 weeks before her death, when she was still lucid enough to plan for my future. "My dearest Emily," the letter began, and I could almost hear her voice speaking the words aloud. "If you are reading this, then you have found the real treasure that I wanted to leave you. The necklace that Michelle will claim from the lawyer's office is a very expensive replica that I had made 5 years ago, when I first suspected that my siblings might try to contest my will. You see, sweetheart, I learned long ago that people's true nature reveals itself when money and inheritance are involved, and I wanted to protect what was rightfully yours." I had to pause in my reading, overwhelmed by the revelation that my mother had anticipated this betrayal and had taken steps to prevent it. She had known, somehow, that her own sister would swoop in like a vulture to claim what didn't belong to her, and she had orchestrated an elaborate deception to ensure that the real family heirloom would remain with me. The letter continued, revealing details about our family history that I had never known. "This necklace belonged to your great-great-grandmother, who brought it with her when she immigrated from Ireland in 1892. She sold everything else she owned to pay for passage to America, but she refused to part with these pearls because they represented hope for a better future. Each generation of women in our family has worn this necklace on their wedding day, and I wore it when I married your father, just as I always dreamed you would wear it on yours. Tears blurred my vision as I read about the sacrifices and dreams of women I had never met but whose blood ran through my veins. My mother had carried this legacy forward, protecting it through her own struggles as a single parent, and now she was passing that responsibility to me. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. Emily, there is something else you need to know about our family. Something I should have told you years ago, but never found the courage to share. Your father didn't abandon us when you were a baby, as I always told you. He died in a car accident when you were 6 months old, and he left behind a trust fund that I have been managing in secret all these years. I told you he was gone because I thought it would be easier than explaining death to a child. And as you grew older, I was afraid to change the story I had created. The words hit me like a thunderbolt, rewriting everything I thought I knew about my own history. All those years of wondering why my father had left, of feeling somehow inadequate or unworthy of his love. And the truth was that he had never chosen to leave at all. The letter went on to explain that the trust fund had grown substantially over the years, and that I was now the beneficiary of an inheritance worth nearly $500,000. I kept this secret because I wanted you to grow up understanding the value of hard work and determination, not relying on money you hadn't earned. But now that I'm gone, this inheritance can help you pursue your dreams of becoming a teacher, of making a difference in children's lives the way you always wanted to. I set the letter down with shaking hands, my mind reeling from the magnitude of what I had just learned. Not only had my mother protected the family necklace from my greedy relatives, but she had also been safeguarding a financial legacy that would change my entire future. As I sat in the fading afternoon light, holding the real pearl necklace against my heart, I felt a complex mixture of emotions washing over me like waves against the shore. There was grief for the mother I had lost, anger at the lies I had been told about my father, gratitude for the sacrifices she had made to protect my inheritance, and a burning desire for justice against the relatives who had tried to steal what was rightfully mine. The replica necklace that Aunt Michelle had claimed would fool her completely. She had never bothered to examine the original closely enough to notice any subtle differences, and her greed had blinded her to the possibility that my mother might have outsmarted her. But I knew that simply possessing the real necklace wasn't enough. I needed to expose their true nature and make them understand that their manipulation and callousness had consequences. The next morning I woke with a sense of purpose that I hadn't felt since my mother's diagnosis. The real pearl necklace lay on my nightstand, catching the early sunlight that streamed through my bedroom window, and I knew exactly what I needed to do. I spent the morning researching jewelry appraisers in Austin, looking for someone with the expertise to authenticate both necklaces and document the differences between them. My mother's letter had mentioned that she had kept all the paperwork from when she had the replica made, including photographs and detailed specifications, and I found these documents in a manila envelope tucked beneath the false bottom of her jewelry case. The evidence was overwhelming: receipts, correspondence with the jeweler, even insurance documentation that clearly showed when the original had been placed in a safety deposit box and replaced with the copy. I called Dr. Patricia Hoffman, a certified gemologist whose credentials impressed me, and explained that I needed an urgent appraisal for legal purposes. Her office was located in downtown Austin, in a sleek building that housed several high-end jewelry stores, and she agreed to see me that afternoon. As I drove through the city, my mind kept returning to the revelation about my father, and I found myself grieving not just for the parent I had lost as a baby, but for all the years I had spent believing I wasn't worthy of his love. My mother had thought she was protecting me, but her well-intentioned lies had shaped my entire sense of self-worth, making me question whether I was somehow fundamentally flawed or unlovable. The truth was both liberating and devastating, like discovering that the foundation of your house had been built on quicksand. Dr. Hoffman was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and she listened patiently as I explained my situation without revealing all the family drama involved. She examined both necklaces under a powerful magnifying glass, testing the pearls with various instruments and comparing their luster, surface quality, and overall construction. "The difference is quite remarkable," she said, after nearly an hour of careful analysis. "This one," she indicated the necklace from the box, "is definitely genuine. Natural saltwater pearls from the late 19th century, probably cultured in the Persian Gulf. The craftsmanship is exquisite, and the silver clasp bears the hallmarks of a master jeweler from that era. This other one, however, is a very high-quality reproduction using cultured freshwater pearls and modern techniques. It's beautiful work, but it's definitely not an antique." The official appraisal documents that Dr. Hoffman prepared were like weapons in my hands, concrete proof that would expose Aunt Michelle's greed and vindicate my mother's memory. The genuine necklace was valued at over $30,000, not just for its materials, but for its historical significance and provenance, while the replica was worth perhaps $300 at most. I asked Dr. Hoffman to prepare 2 copies of her report, one for my records and one that I planned to present at a family gathering I was already planning in my mind. As I left her office, I felt a surge of confidence that I hadn't experienced in months, knowing that I finally had the tools to fight back against the people who had tried to steal my inheritance and dishonor my mother's wishes. That evening, I called Aunt Michelle and invited her to dinner at my house the following Sunday, explaining that I wanted to discuss some family matters and perhaps look through my mother's photo albums together. Her voice was sickeningly sweet as she accepted the invitation, probably assuming that I had accepted defeat and was ready to play the role of the grateful niece who appreciated whatever scraps she was willing to throw my way. I also called Stephen and extended the same invitation, along with my Uncle Robert and his wife Linda, who had been notably absent from the will reading, but who I knew would be curious about what their siblings had inherited. The stage was set for a confrontation that would finally reveal the truth about my family's character and my mother's incredible foresight. I spent the week preparing for the dinner party with the same meticulous attention to detail that my mother had always brought to important occasions. I cleaned the house from top to bottom, planned a menu that would keep everyone comfortable and relaxed, and most importantly, I arranged for my friend Sarah to be present as a witness to whatever unfolded. Sarah was a paralegal with a sharp mind and an even sharper tongue, and I knew she would be able to help me navigate any legal complications that might arise. I also contacted Mr. Henderson and asked him to be available by phone during the dinner, in case I needed professional guidance about how to handle the revelation of the replica necklace and its implications for the will. The genuine pearl necklace remained hidden in my bedroom, while I prepared a small display in the living room featuring the replica that Aunt Michelle believed she owned, along with several of my mother's other jewelry pieces and some family photographs. I wanted to create an atmosphere of nostalgia and remembrance, to remind everyone of the woman we had lost and the love she had shown to all of us over the years. But beneath the surface of this sentimental gathering, I was preparing to expose the ugly truth about greed and manipulation that had poisoned our family relationships. My mother had taught me to be kind and forgiving, but she had also taught me to stand up for what was right, and I knew she would approve of what I was about to do. As Sunday approached, I found myself alternating between nervous excitement and deep sadness. Part of me wished that I could simply keep the real necklace and let Aunt Michelle enjoy her replica in ignorance, avoiding the confrontation that would inevitably destroy what remained of our family bonds. But every time I looked at my mother's photograph on the mantelpiece, I remembered her words about the importance of truth and integrity, and I knew that allowing the deception to continue would be a betrayal of everything she had taught me. The people who had tried to steal from me needed to understand that their actions had consequences, and that my mother's love and wisdom extended far beyond the grave to protect the daughter she had cherished above all else. The morning of the dinner party dawned clear and bright, with the kind of perfect Texas weather that made everything seem possible. I put on the dress my mother had bought me for my college graduation, a simple but elegant navy blue that made me feel confident and mature, and I clasped the genuine pearl necklace around my throat for the first time. The weight of it felt like my ancestors' hands on my shoulders, giving me strength for the battle ahead. As I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw not just my own reflection, but the faces of all the women who had worn this necklace before me, and I promised them silently that I would honor their legacy by fighting for the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The doorbell rang at exactly 6 o'clock, and I took a deep breath before opening the door to find Aunt Michelle standing on my porch, resplendent in a designer outfit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. She was wearing the replica necklace, of course, and she touched it possessively as she leaned in to give me an air kiss that barely grazed my cheek. Stephen arrived moments later with Uncle Robert and Aunt Linda, and I noticed how their eyes immediately began cataloging the contents of my living room, probably calculating the value of my mother's remaining possessions. The dinner conversation was strained but polite, filled with the kind of superficial pleasantries that people use when they're trying to avoid discussing the elephant in the room. As we moved to the living room for coffee, Aunt Michelle began telling the story of how she had inherited the pearl necklace, embellishing the tale with fictional memories of conversations she claimed to have had with my mother about the family heirloom. The moment I had been waiting for arrived when I excused myself and returned with the wooden box and Dr. Hoffman's appraisal documents, my heart pounding with anticipation. "Aunt Michelle," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "I think there's something you should know about that necklace you're wearing." The room fell silent as I opened the wooden box and revealed the genuine pearl necklace, its lustrous beauty immediately apparent even to untrained eyes. I handed Dr. Hoffman's appraisal report to Aunt Michelle, watching as her hands trembled while she read the devastating assessment, and explained that the necklace she claimed was a replica, while this was the real family heirloom. The confrontation that followed was ugly and painful, filled with accusations and threats. But as I fastened the genuine pearl necklace around my throat, I felt my mother's presence surrounding me like a protective embrace, knowing that love and wisdom had triumphed over greed and deception. The weeks that followed the dinner party brought a peace I hadn't felt since my mother's death, as if exposing the truth had lifted a weight from my shoulders that I didn't even realize I'd been carrying. Aunt Michelle and Stephen stopped calling, their silence speaking volumes about their shame and defeat, while Uncle Robert made one awkward attempt at reconciliation that I politely but firmly declined. I used part of my father's trust fund to pay off my student loans and enrolled in a graduate program to become a teacher, finally pursuing the dream my mother had always encouraged me to follow. The genuine pearl necklace became my daily reminder of the strength and wisdom that ran through the women in my family, and I wore it not as a symbol of wealth, but as a testament to the power of love and truth. Every morning when I fastened the clasp, I could almost hear my mother's voice whispering that the most precious things in life aren't always what they seem to be, and I finally understood that she had been talking about courage, integrity, and the unbreakable bonds between mothers and daughters. 6 months later, I stood in front of my first classroom of third graders, the pearl necklace hidden beneath my simple blouse, but its presence giving me confidence as I introduced myself to 22 eager faces. One little girl with pigtails raised her hand and asked if I was wearing something special because I looked like a princess, and I smiled as I touched the pearls through my shirt, thinking about all the women who had worn them before me. That afternoon, I visited my mother's grave for the first time since the funeral, carrying fresh flowers and a letter I had written to thank her for the incredible gift she had given me. Not just the necklace or the money, but the knowledge that I was worthy of love and capable of fighting for what was right. As I knelt beside her headstone, I whispered the words I wished I had said while she was alive, that I understood now why she had kept so many secrets, and that I forgave her for the lies that had been born from love rather than malice. The Texas wind rustled through the oak trees above us, and I knew with absolute certainty that my mother was at peace, knowing that her daughter had finally learned the most important lesson of all, that true inheritance isn't measured in dollars or jewels, but in the strength to stand up for truth and the wisdom to protect what matters most.